A homeless man whispered just 2 words, "Don't talk," to a female officer, and those words might have saved her life. Most people walking through the streets of Milwaukee late at night barely notice what's around them. They're in a rush, eyes on their phones, or too tired to care. But for Raymond Ellis, every sound, every shadow, every strange movement meant something. His life on the streets had trained him to see danger long before it revealed itself. That night, the air felt heavy, as if something was about to break. He sat under the chipped green awning of a closed diner on West Wisconsin Avenue, sipping the last of a convenience store coffee he'd stretched over 2 hours. He was used to blending into the background, invisible to everyone else. But then he saw them. 2 men standing too close to a line of parked cars, their posture wrong, their eyes fixed in one direction. Raymond leaned forward, squinting in the glow of the flickering streetlight. He'd seen his share of hustlers, drunks, and desperate thieves. This was different. The men weren't waiting for a ride. They weren't killing time. They were hunting. "Not good," he muttered under his breath. One of them adjusted his jacket, and that's when Raymond's stomach turned. The flash of a black handle tucked under the fabric wasn't lost on him. A knife. Not for show, not for defense. This was ready for use. He froze for a moment, fighting the urge to yell out, but that he knew noise could trigger violence. He had learned that silence often bought him more time than shouting. That's when she appeared, a patrol officer walking her beat, uniform neat, radio clipped to her shoulder, boots echoing on the concrete. Officer Megan Holloway, 34 years old, had worked these blocks plenty of nights. She wasn't new to tension, but fatigue had its grip on her. She was finishing up a long shift, thinking of her apartment a few miles away, her cat probably waiting by the door. Raymond's heart thumped harder. She was heading straight into their line of sight. He shifted his weight, pretending to rearrange his blanket, though his eyes never left the men. He thought back to everything the streets had taught him. People dismissed him, passed by like he was invisible, but being unseen had become a strange sort of power. He caught what others missed. Tonight, that awareness might be the only thing standing between life and death. Megan reached for her keys as she neared her squad car parked at the curb. Her shoulders slumped for just a second, the kind of posture you only show when you think the night is winding down. She didn't know she was being watched, studied. Raymond's pulse quickened. He shifted his body out from under the awning, the plastic bag of bottles he collected earlier rattling softly at his side. His instincts screamed at him to move closer, but he couldn't spook the men either. They'd already noticed him. One of them gave him a sharp look, like they were deciding whether he was a problem or just another homeless guy in the way. Raymond forced himself to play small. He hunched, limping slightly as he crossed toward a trash bin, pretending to rummage for cans. His fingers shook as he fished around in the bag, but his eyes stayed locked on the reflection in the diner window, watching the men, watching the officer. "Come on, lady," he whispered, too low for her to hear. "Don't walk blind." Every nerve in his body was alive, stretched thin. He wanted to call out, but the wrong word could set the knife free. He wanted to run, but his legs felt anchored to the cracked sidewalk. Raymond knew something Megan didn't. The city could turn on you in an instant, and the wrong corner, the wrong second, could be your last. Tonight, the line between her safety and disaster rested on whether or not he made the right move. But as Megan reached for her car door, Raymond saw something in the men's stance that told him the danger was about to erupt, and he knew silence was no longer enough. Megan Holloway wasn't new to late-night patrols, but something about this block always put her on edge. West Wisconsin Avenue could look calm one minute and explode the next. She had answered too many calls here. Bar fights, break-ins, the occasional stabbing outside of a liquor store. Still, she walked with the steady rhythm of someone who knew her job, one hand brushing against her duty belt out of habit. She didn't notice Raymond at first. To her, he was just another figure hunched near a trash bin, doing what countless people did on these streets, staying out of sight, keeping to themselves. Her mind was elsewhere, the pile of reports waiting on her desk, the ache in her shoulders, the silence of her apartment. She thought of her younger brother back in Racine, who always told her she worked too hard. Maybe he was right. Maybe tonight would be quiet enough for her to clock out without a story. But Raymond knew otherwise. From his crouched position by the bin, he tracked the men carefully. They weren't whispering to each other anymore. Their eyes cut toward Megan, sharp, focused. One of them adjusted his sleeve again, revealing just enough metal in the faint streetlight to make Raymond's mouth dry. Megan unlocked her squad car with a click that echoed louder than she intended. Her hand gripped the handle, and that's when she finally felt it. Eyes on her. She turned her head slightly, trying not to draw attention to the fact she had noticed. Years on the force had sharpened her instincts. Something wasn't right. Raymond's heart raced. He had seconds, maybe less. He shuffled closer, pushing a half-empty soda can around with his foot, pretending to be occupied. But when he looked up, his eyes met Megan's for the first time. "Don't talk," he mouthed, barely moving his lips. Megan frowned. She wasn't sure she read him right. Her hand lingered on the car door, but she didn't open it. Instead, her gaze flicked to the men across the street. They had shifted now, one taking a step forward, the other scanning the block as if to check for witnesses. She finally understood. Megan let her hand drop casually to her sidearm, not pulling it, just resting there. Her other hand hovered near the radio on her shoulder. She couldn't make a sudden move, not yet. Raymond kept his body between her and the men, leaning against the trash bin like it was the only thing holding him upright. His presence confused them, and that was exactly what he wanted. He had lived long enough on the margins to know how to play the distraction. One of the men finally spoke, his voice low but clear enough to carry across the empty street. "You lost, officer?" Megan's jaw tensed. "Not tonight," she replied evenly, her tone calm but firm. The second man chuckled, stepping forward. "Looks like you're all alone." Raymond's chest tightened. He glanced at Megan again, trying to signal her without words. She caught it this time. There was no mistaking the urgency in his stare. Her thumb pressed the radio switch on her shoulder. "Unit 14, possible disturbance on Wisconsin and 18th. Send backup." Her voice was measured, giving nothing away, but her pulse pounded like a drum. The men exchanged a look. They hadn't expected her to react so quickly. One of them cursed under his breath. Raymond spoke up suddenly, his voice gravelly, rough from nights spent in the cold. "Hey, leave her alone. She's working." Megan's eyes widened slightly. She didn't expect him to speak. The man closest to them sneered. "Mind your business, old man." Raymond stepped forward just enough to make it clear he wasn't backing down. His hands shook, but he forced them still by clenching the strap of his bag. "This is my business," he said, voice steady now. The street went quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic a block away. Megan tightened her grip near her holster. She couldn't predict what would happen next, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just another patrol stop anymore. But the silence didn't last long, because the moment one of the men shifted his jacket again, the threat became impossible to ignore. The sound of footsteps echoed as one of the men edged closer, his sneakers scraping against the uneven sidewalk. His body language said everything. He wasn't bluffing. He wanted Megan to know he had control of the moment. Raymond shifted, deliberately placing himself half a step in front of her, still pretending to dig through the trash. He pulled out a crushed soda bottle and shook it slightly, the rattle echoing louder than expected. It was enough of a distraction to buy Megan another few seconds. The taller of the two men leaned his head to the side, staring at Raymond with annoyance. "Man, you really don't know when to shut up, do you?" Raymond met his glare. His voice came low but firm. "I've seen your kind before, always thinking nobody's watching." He gestured toward Megan. "But tonight, someone is." The man took another step forward, and Megan shifted her stance, her hand still resting near her holster. Her training screamed at her not to escalate, but she was cornered. The alley to her right was blocked by construction fencing. Behind her sat the squad car, but she couldn't climb inside without turning her back. "Sir," Megan said, her tone sharp now, "take a step back." The man smirked. "Or what?" The second one, shorter and stockier, tapped his jacket with 2 fingers. The metallic glint of the knife handle flashed again under the streetlight. "You don't want this to go bad, officer," he said with a mocking grin. Megan's pulse kicked hard, but her voice stayed steady. "Drop whatever you're holding." Right now, Raymond swallowed. He knew this standoff could tip either way. If Megan pulled too soon, she risked being rushed. If she waited too long, they'd strike first. He clenched his fists inside his pockets, feeling the frayed fabric of his gloves tear a little under the pressure. The taller man took another step. "You gonna listen to her? Or you gonna learn the hard way?" He sneered at Raymond. Raymond didn't flinch. "You think I care what happens to me?" His tone hardened, laced with something raw. I've been through worse than both of you can imagine. But she's not your target tonight. Megan flicked her eyes at him, surprised. His words weren't just bravado, they carried weight, like someone who had already stared down more nights than he could count. The shorter man laughed, but there was no humor in it. Big words for someone digging in the trash. Raymond squared his shoulders. Yeah, I dig in the trash, but I still see you. That means you've already lost. That sentence rattled them more than either expected. The taller one shifted, uneasy with how the script had flipped. He wasn't used to someone standing up to him, let alone a man society pretended didn't exist. Megan took the chance. You're both making mistakes you can't walk back, she said. Her voice rose louder now, the authority in her tone cutting through the night. Backup is already on the way. You want to gamble on how long you have left? Her words landed heavy. The men froze for just a second, weighing whether to call her bluff. That second mattered. Raymond, sensing the hesitation, pressed further. You hear that? His eyes darted to the faint siren wailing in the distance. It wasn't close yet, but it was real. That's not for you. Not yet. But it will be if you stick around. The shorter one cursed under his breath. Man, let's go, he muttered to his partner. But the taller one wasn't ready to walk away. He pulled the knife halfway out, the steel catching the glow of the streetlight. The sight churned Megan's stomach, but her face stayed hard. Put it down, she barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. The man smirked. Or what? You gonna shoot with your little friend in the way? He pointed at Raymond. Raymond felt his chest tighten. The man was right. If Megan fired, he was in the line. Still, he didn't move. He planted his feet, his frame steady. Try me, Megan said, her hand fully gripping her holster now. The taller man's grin faltered just enough to show a crack of doubt. He wasn't expecting this much resistance, especially not from both of them. Raymond's voice broke through the silence again, quiet but sharp. You want to end up behind bars for the rest of your life? Because you're 3 seconds away from making that choice permanent. The man's knife hand twitched. His partner tugged at his sleeve, nervous now. Man, we don't need this. Let's bounce before it's too late. But just as it looked like they might back down, the taller one's anger flared, and the knife came out fully, gleaming under the light. The knife caught the light as it came fully out of the man's jacket, and for a brief second, the street seemed smaller, tighter, as though the air itself had gone still. Megan's muscles tightened, her hand locked around her holster, ready to pull if he lunged. But between her and danger stood Raymond, steady as a barrier he had no business being. Raymond took a step forward, his shoes scraping against the concrete. His voice dropped to a whisper aimed at Megan. Don't move too fast. Let him burn out first. She wanted to shout at him to get out of the way, but something in his eyes made her pause. They were tired eyes, yes, but sharp. This was a man who had survived nights colder and darker than this one, who understood that sometimes survival meant knowing when to wait. The taller man waved the knife with a mocking twist of his wrist. Look at this hero. Think you can save her? His words carried a sneer, but his grip was tight, his bravado cracking at the edges. Megan's voice rang clear. Put the knife down! Last warning. Raymond didn't flinch. He tilted his head toward the man, his tone even. You're not thinking straight. You got options right now, but the second you cross that line, you'll lose every one of them. The shorter man tugged at his friend's sleeve again. We need to go. Now, she ain't bluffing. But the knife stayed up. The taller one's eyes darted between Raymond and Megan, calculating. His jaw worked, grinding his teeth. Megan's thumb pressed her radio again, voice controlled but forceful. Unit 14. Suspect with a weapon. Immediate assistance. The crackle of the radio filled the night, amplifying the tension. Raymond shifted his weight deliberately, leaning closer to the man without breaking eye contact. You're not ready for what comes next. I've been where you're standing, thinking I had nothing left to lose. Trust me, you don't want to carry this. The man's lips curled into a half snarl. You don't know me. Raymond's voice stayed steady. I know enough. That blade isn't just steel. It's a life sentence waiting to happen. The silence stretched, and for the first time the knife lowered a fraction. Megan saw it, her heart pounding harder. She whispered, so low only Raymond could catch it. You're buying us time. Raymond didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. He didn't need to speak. His body was saying it all. The taller man spat onto the ground, frustrated. His partner muttered, "Cops are coming. We gotta move." Raymond seized the moment. He raised his voice just enough for Megan to hear clearly while staring straight at the suspects. "Don't talk. Let me hold them." Megan froze. It wasn't just words, it was instruction. He wanted her quiet so they could focus on him, not her. For an officer used to commanding every scene, surrendering control was foreign, but she trusted him. Somehow, she knew he had already saved her life once tonight by noticing what she didn't. The taller man jabbed the air with the knife. "Old man, you're not stopping me." Raymond took another step forward, closing the gap, his face calm but locked in. "Maybe not. But I'm not moving either. If you want her, you gotta come through me." That hit harder than a weapon ever could. The man faltered, his grip trembling. He looked at Raymond, ragged coat, weathered face, calloused hands, and for some reason, he hesitated. Maybe he saw someone who had nothing left to fear. Maybe he saw the truth in those worn-out eyes. The faint wail of sirens finally cut through the stillness, distant but growing louder. The shorter man cursed again. "They're close. We gotta go now." He tugged harder, trying to pull his friend away. The taller man's knife wavered, then dropped slightly. His chest rose and fell in frustration, his plan crumbling. "This ain't over," he growled, backing up a step. Raymond exhaled, the first real breath he'd taken in minutes. Megan's hand stayed tight on her holster, but she didn't move. The men glanced down the street, weighing their options. The sound of backup was undeniable now. Sirens cutting through the city night, flashing lights faint but visible. But just as it seemed the danger was retreating, the taller man spun one last time, knife still in hand, forcing both Megan and Raymond to make a choice in the blink of an eye. The taller man's sudden twist sent a spark of panic through the air. The knife jerked upward again, his arm snapping back like a coiled spring. Raymond reacted before Megan could. He lunged sideways, swinging his bag of bottles hard against the man's wrist. The plastic cracked, cans and glass rattling as they spilled across the pavement. The knife clattered against the ground, spinning just inches from Megan's boots. "Back up!" Megan shouted, her weapon finally drawn and trained on the suspect. Her voice was iron now, no room for negotiation. The shorter man froze, eyes darting between the gun in Megan's hands and the knife skidding across the concrete. His chest heaved. "Man, we didn't mean—" "Don't move!" Megan cut him off, her stance solid. The taller one snarled, clutching his wrist, glaring at Raymond. "You think you're a hero? You just made a mistake." Raymond stood tall despite the tremor in his hands. "The only mistake here is yours," he shot back. His voice cracked with exhaustion, but carried a weight that silenced even the shorter man. The taller suspect's rage boiled, his chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. He glanced at the squad car, then at Megan, then back at the knife on the ground. His eyes burned with the calculation of a man desperate to reclaim control. Megan barked again, "On the ground! Both of you!" The shorter man dropped to his knees, hands raised. His survival instinct had finally taken over, but the taller man refused. He stepped backward slowly, his eyes never leaving Raymond's. Raymond raised his hands slightly, palms open, his voice calm but direct. "It's done. Don't throw your whole life away on one more bad choice." The sirens grew louder, filling the block. Blue and red light flickered faintly off the diner's windows now, growing brighter by the second. But desperation makes people reckless. The taller man suddenly lunged, not for Megan, not for the shorter partner, but straight for Raymond. His fist connected hard against Raymond's shoulder, knocking him sideways into the trash bin. The crash echoed down the block. Megan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice cutting like a blade. Raymond groaned, bracing himself on the edge of the bin. His ribs screamed in protest, but he forced himself upright. His eyes locked on the suspect again, refusing to cower. "That all you got?" he spat, defiant despite the pain. The words landed like a slap. The taller man faltered, caught off guard by Raymond's refusal to break. At that moment, squad cars screeched into view, tires screaming against the asphalt. Doors flew open and several officers poured out, weapons drawn, voices overlapping. "Drop to the ground!" Now, the taller man's head whipped around, panic flashing across his face. His chest heaved as the reality of the situation crashed down on him. He was surrounded, outnumbered. The shorter man shouted, "Do what they say!" His knees hit the pavement fully, his hands high. Finally, with a guttural yell, the taller suspect threw his arms wide in frustration and dropped flat to the ground. Officers swarmed, cuffing both men in seconds. Megan lowered her weapon only once she was sure they were restrained. Her breaths came fast, sharp, but her voice was steady when she called into the radio. "Unit 14, suspects in custody." Raymond leaned heavily against the trash bin, his shoulder throbbing where the punch had landed. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing on him all at once. Megan holstered her weapon and stepped closer. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes scanning him. Raymond nodded, though his grimace told the truth. "I've been hit worse," he muttered. She gave him a long look, the kind of look that held gratitude, but also disbelief. "You didn't have to do that." Raymond shook his head. "If I hadn't, you'd be the one in cuffs, or worse." His voice was raw, tired, but unshaken. The flashing lights painted the street in harsh blues and reds. Officers moved quickly, securing evidence, questioning the suspects. But in the middle of it all stood Megan and Raymond, two unlikely allies who had faced down the knife together. But even with the suspects in custody and the danger gone, Megan knew this wasn't the end. Because what lingered now was the question of who Raymond really was, and why he risked everything for her. The suspects were hauled into the back of separate squad cars, their angry shouts muffled by the heavy doors slamming shut. The street that had been thick with tension just minutes ago was now buzzing with controlled chaos. Officers taking statements, radios crackling with reports, evidence bags sealing away the knife. The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the diner windows, throwing fractured colors across the cracked pavement. Megan finally let her shoulders drop. She felt the burn of adrenaline leaving her body, leaving behind exhaustion. She turned and saw Raymond still leaning on the trash bin, his chest heaving from the blow he'd taken. She stepped toward him. "You need an ambulance?" Raymond waved her off. "Don't waste taxpayer money on me." "I'm fine." He tried to straighten his coat, though the fabric hung loosely on his thin frame. Megan tilted her head, unconvinced. "You took a pretty hard hit." Raymond smirked, though it was half a grimace. "Lady, I've slept under bridges in January. A punch is nothing." For the first time all night, Megan let herself laugh, short, tired, but genuine. "You're unbelievable." One of the officers approached her, notepad in hand. "Officer Holloway, do you want us to process him as a witness?" He glanced at Raymond with a skeptical eye, as if wondering why a homeless man was standing in the center of the action. Megan looked at Raymond, then back at her colleague. "He's more than a witness. He's the reason I'm standing here right now." The officer raised his brows but didn't argue. He jotted something down and moved on. Raymond shifted awkwardly, not used to being acknowledged like that. "You don't have to make it sound bigger than it was," he muttered. Megan shook her head firmly. "You stepped in when no one else would." "Don't downplay that." Silence stretched between them for a moment. The noise of radios and officers faded into the background, leaving just the two of them under the awning's shadow. Finally, Megan spoke again, softer this time. "Why did you do it?" Raymond's eyes flickered away. He scratched the back of his neck, uncomfortable. "Because I've been invisible too long. People walk past me every day like I'm not even here. Tonight, I figured maybe I could matter, even if it was just for 5 minutes." The words hit Megan harder than she expected. She saw the lines on his face differently now, not just from hardship, but from years of being ignored. "You mattered more than 5 minutes," she said, her voice steady. "You changed the outcome of tonight." Raymond chuckled dryly. "Don't make me sound like some kind of saint." "I still gotta find somewhere to sleep after this." Megan looked at him carefully. "Where do you usually go?" He shrugged. "Depends which bench hasn't been taken, or which shelter still has room. Most nights, I don't get a choice." There was no bitterness in his tone, just fact. That somehow made it heavier. Megan wanted to say something, but her radio crackled again, reminding her she still had a report to finish and a shift to close. She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded bill. "Here," she said, holding it out. Raymond shook his head instantly. "Don't. If I wanted a handout, I'd ask Megan didn't withdraw the money. Instead, she placed it gently on top of the trash bin beside him. Then think of it as thanks, not charity." Raymond eyed the bill, then her. After a long pause, he sighed. "You're stubborn, you know that? Comes with the badge." she replied with a small smile. The squad cars pulled away, leaving the street quieter, though the tension still clung to the air. Officers wrapped up their tasks, and one by one they dispersed. Soon, it was just Megan and Raymond again, the night pressing down around them. She exhaled, glancing at her watch. I should head back to the station. Raymond nodded. And I should head back to nowhere. He said it with a wry grin, but Megan could hear the truth beneath it. For the first time, she saw him not just as a man who had saved her, but as someone the city had forgotten. And that realization lodged deep in her chest. But as Megan turned toward her squad car, she realized this night wasn't something she could file away in a report. It was something she'd carry, because Raymond had given her a lesson she wasn't expecting. When Megan slid into her squad car, the weight of the night sank into her bones. Her training had taught her to process situations, file reports, and move on. But this wasn't something she could just box up in a folder. Her eyes drifted to the side mirror, where she caught sight of Raymond still standing by the trash bin, pulling his coat tighter around his shoulders. He looked smaller now that the lights and chaos were gone, like the city had already swallowed him back into its shadows. She gripped the steering wheel, then let go, leaning back against the seat. The question nagged at her. How many times had she passed someone like him before without a second thought? 100? 1,000? To her, the people on these sidewalks had often blended into the background, faces she barely registered between calls. Tonight proved how wrong she'd been. Raymond, meanwhile, didn't move right away. He stood there in the quiet, the street finally settling. His body ached from the punch, but there was something deeper stirring inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. For years, he'd been ignored, walked past, sometimes shoved aside. Tonight, he had been seen, not for what he lacked, but for what he gave. He muttered to himself, "Guess I'm not invisible after all." The words came with a half smile, though he quickly pulled his collar up against the cold. Megan opened her car door again and stepped out, her boots crunching against the scattered glass on the ground. Raymond looked up, surprised. "You should be on your way," he said. "I should," Megan admitted, "but I don't want to leave this conversation unfinished." Raymond raised an eyebrow. Conversation? Didn't think a cop had much more to say to someone like me. Megan walked closer, her expression firm but thoughtful. "You've got it backward." "Tonight, you taught me something." Raymond gave a short laugh. "Taught you?" "Lady, I just got in the way of a knife. Not exactly textbook wisdom. You reminded me that the people we ignore are often the ones paying the most attention," Megan replied. Her voice softened. "You saved my life tonight. That matters." Raymond looked away, uncomfortable with the weight of her words. "Maybe. But tomorrow, I'll still be hunting for a bench that isn't freezing." Megan nodded slowly. "That's true. I can't fix everything. But maybe I can make sure people like you aren't written off so easily." For a moment, the city noise returned. The distant honk of a horn, the rumble of a bus. But neither of them moved. It was as though the street itself was holding the silence between them. Finally, Raymond broke it. "You know, years ago, I used to have a job. Construction out in Kenosha. Long days, busted hands, but steady work. Then my back went out, and everything else followed. Lost the job, then the apartment, then... Well, you can see where I landed." Megan listened, not as a cop taking a statement, but as a person hearing another's truth. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Raymond shrugged. "Life doesn't owe you sorry. You either keep standing or you don't." Megan studied him for a moment, then said, "You kept standing tonight. And you didn't just stand for yourself, you stood for me." Raymond chuckled dryly. "Don't go making me into some kind of hero." "Heroes get medals. I get soup when the shelters still have some left." "Maybe being a hero isn't about medals," Megan countered. "Maybe it's about showing up when no one expects you to." The words hung in the air, sinking deeper than either expected. Megan finally reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a card. "This is my direct line. If you're ever in trouble, or even if you just need someone to listen, call." Raymond stared at the card in her hand. He hesitated, then slowly took it. For once, he didn't argue. She gave him a final look before returning to her car. As she drove away, Raymond tucked the card carefully into his coat, like something too valuable to lose. For Megan, the lesson was simple, but life-changing. The people we dismiss can sometimes carry the strength to save us. And for Raymond, the night proved that even when the world turned its back, his choices still mattered. Because in the end, being seen isn't just about someone looking your way. It's about someone recognizing your worth. And if this story reminds you that courage can come from the most unexpected places, then don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard.